Getting online using 4G or 5G technology, you can normally save a lot of money compared to using fiber broadband, and you might be able to get faster speeds as well. But what are the downsides to getting online with 4G or 5G? In this video, we've explained some of the downsides to getting online at home using wireless broadband technology. But before we begin, thanks to 3 for sponsoring this video. Their 5G broadband plans offer really fast download speeds for a very reasonable monthly cost. Their plans come with unlimited data, and their 5G router is really easy to set up. It also offers really good Wi-Fi signal from our testing. If you're considering getting online with 5G, click the link in the description to the 3 website to see if you can get their 5G hub deals at your address. So one of the main things to watch out for when using mobile broadband to get online at home is these internet deals sometimes come with a data limit. For example, this is EE's version of the 3 5G hub. Confusingly, they've called it the same thing. One of their plans has a monthly data limit, and you have to pay more to get unlimited data. 500 gigabytes is a decent amount, but as a family, you could easily use more data than this in a given month, especially if there's gamers in the house, often downloading new games, or updates for titles they're already playing. These game patches can easily be 20, 30, 50 gigabytes by themselves, meaning you could hit your limit quite quickly. Really, we recommend going for unlimited data, unless it's just 1 or 2 people at home. This is one of the big advantages of the 3 5G hub. It comes with unlimited data, and you don't need to pay more for it, meaning you don't have to worry about hitting any limits. The second downside to getting online with 4G or 5G is your speed can fluctuate quite a bit, depending on who's using the 4G or 5G network, and other factors like weather interference. So we've tested most of the 4G and 5G broadband plans on the market at the moment, and we've found with 5G for example, it's pretty typical for your speed to bounce between about 300 to 500 megabits per second throughout the course of a day, sometimes briefly going down to 100 to 150 megabits per second. The good thing is, if you have good signal, you shouldn't expect your speeds to go down below 100 megabits per second on 5G very often, if at all. It's just you'll have to be used to it fluctuating by 50 to 100% or more throughout the day, meaning if you're downloading a large file, how long this will take depends on how fast the internet is at that given moment. The good thing about the 3 4G hub and 5G hub is they let you test it out for 30 days to see what the speeds are like before you commit to the contract. If you're not happy with the speeds or how consistent they are, you can return the router within 30 days for a full refund. If you're considering buying 3 wireless broadband, make sure to click the link in the description to see what deals they're offering at the moment and to find out if you can get their 4G hub or 5G hub at your address. One of the biggest downsides to 4G or 5G broadband, especially for gamers, is its latency. Latency is basically a measure of how responsive your connection is when sending or receiving tiny little packets of data. So a higher latency is worse, because that means it takes longer for these small packets of data to be transmitted or received. With a fiber broadband connection, in the UK, you can normally expect a latency of about 10 to 20 milliseconds. With 4G or 5G broadband, we found our latency was typically about 30 to 40 milliseconds. But although the latency is higher, you can still play online games without any issues. We've done a lot of testing of the 5G hub, playing games like Rocket League, as well as shooters like Battlefield and Call of Duty. What happens is basically, your ping sits a bit higher than it would on a fiber connection, but we didn't experience any lag spikes, or packet loss or disconnections, or anything like that. The experience was smooth, and we were still able to perform well. What helps a bit is to use a wired connection to the router if you're playing really ping sensitive games, instead of using Wi-Fi. This is what helped us to keep our ping consistent. If you play less ping sensitive games, like most Switch or mobile games, you don't have to worry about this at all, and you don't have to worry about plugging into the router with an Ethernet cable. Your experience should be basically the same as playing online on a fiber connection. And if you don't play online games at all, there's nothing to be concerned about here. The latency on offer from 4G and 5G is perfectly fine for everyday stuff, like Zoom calls and that sort of thing. When you buy a 4G or 5G broadband deal, you have to set it up yourself, and it can help to know what you're doing, although the process isn't that difficult. Now let's explain what we mean. So when you get the 3 5G hub for example, basically you get the router, a SIM card, an instruction booklet, and the power cord. You need to insert the SIM card into the router and then plug it in. It's not like with a fiber broadband connection, where often an engineer comes over and helps set up things for you. The downside of that though is you have to book in the engineer visit, and you have to be at home on the day, which can be a bit of a hassle. So once you plug in the router, it'll connect to 4G or 5G, and then create a Wi-Fi hotspot you can use to get online. But there's a bit more you still have to do to get the best possible speeds. It's a good idea to test the router in different positions to see where it gets the best 4G or 5G signal. Since the router is only plugged into a power cord, you can put it basically wherever you want in the house. In general, the best place is an upstairs windowsill, somewhere nice and high, towards the edge of the house, where the router can communicate with the nearest 5G mast. But it's important to test out a few different positions, such as different sides of the house, to see where you get the best signal. Ultimately, this process can be a bit of a hassle, but for a lot of people, you might prefer this to having an engineer come over and setting it up for you, like you normally do with fibre broadband. When you buy something like the 35G hub or the Vodafone GigaCube, you can't buy a landline service to go with it. Most of the time, the SIM card included with the router is data only, so you can't use it to make landline calls. You'll need to buy a voice over IP compatible landline phone and then connect it to a VoIP provider, separate to your 4G or 5G home broadband connection. Your VoIP connection will run over your internet, but you'll still need to use a VoIP provider to route the calls for you. Just note, you'll need to check that the network you're using is good for VoIP, because some 4G and 5G networks can have issues with this. We've seen some issues reported on the EE network in some areas, even though they have the best mobile network in the UK in terms of speeds and coverage. Essentially, getting set up with a landline using 4G or 5G broadband can be a bit tricky. Despite all these downsides, using something like the 35G hub is often the cheapest way to get online in most parts of the UK. And even though 5G broadband is so cheap, it still offers really fast download speeds. 3 advertisers, you'll get an average of 150 megabits per second with their router, but 300 to 500 megabits was pretty typical for us, and we even got more than 700 on some occasions. While the latency is a bit high using mobile broadband, it's perfectly usable for online games, and the setup process for these devices is normally pretty straightforward, although there is a bit of effort to put it in different positions and see where you get the best signal. We have heaps of videos on our channel of setting up 4G and 5G routers in case you need help. And if you're considering using 3 home broadband, click the link in the description to see what deals they're currently offering and to find out if you can get their service at your address. Also, if you have any questions about using 4G or 5G internet, leave a comment and we'll respond as soon as we can.